In this video, we're talking about more severe weather in the plains. Then, we are shifting our focus onto a very concerning storm that is brewing in the Caribbean. This storm may pose extremely dangerous threats to the Gulf Coast, and it might be time to start preparing. Welcome back, y'all. Ryan Hall here with the weather forecast. Guys, once again, things are ramping up out there, and it's time to start tracking some cyclones. However, there is a very substantial severe weather threat today in the plains in the Midwest, and I want to also look at that, and I actually want to start there. So if you only want to watch the parts of this video that pertain to you, that's perfectly fine. I have timestamps down below so you can do that. And now, without further ado, let's start talking about the weather. All right, here's a big old look at the United States of America, and as you can see, we are back to looking at the satellite view here. We got some big old red blobs out here in the central portion of the United States, and you're like, oh Lord, what does that mean? Don't worry, this ain't no giant death storm that's coming to take out Minnesota and Wisconsin and Iowa. However, it is something to cause a little bit of concern because this is the system that will spark severe weather later today in Iowa, Minnesota, and places like that. So make sure you watch that part of the video. If you live up here, there's going to be some pretty substantial impacts from these storms, I believe. But the elephant in the room and the little guy down there in the corner that just won't leave you alone, you can't take your eye off of him down here south of Cuba, that's what we're going to spend the vast majority of today's video talking about. This colorful array of satellite imagery is showing us Invest 99L. This is what's going to probably become Hurricane Ida at some point. And all of the forecast models right now are turning this into a major hurricane and then running it right into the Gulf Coast of the United States. This thing hasn't even formed yet. Look at it. It's just a cluster of thunderstorms. There's not a lot of rotation. There's not a low-level center here. That's why it's called Invest 99L right now. But that may change today. And we're going to talk more about that right here in a second. But first, let's look at those severe thunderstorms on the weather models. All right, now we're looking at the NAM 3-kilometer model, okay? And we're going to track these severe thunderstorms, man. Today, we have a slight risk of severe weather from Montana all the way down into South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, and portions of extreme northwestern Illinois. And then that little orange area there, that's your enhanced risk, okay? That's an elevated risk of severe weather for southern portions of Minnesota and northern portions of Iowa. If you are in that orange area today, there's a good chance you're going to see some damaging winds, okay? So let's check it out. Let's look at the timing and everything. If you want to keep up with the date and time, it's always going to be displayed up there above my head. What we're looking at here is the composite reflectivity model. This is going to show us what the radar could look like as we go later on into the day. And remember, this time is going to be in Eastern time, so just keep that in mind. And as you can see, we have a big old system up here that's going to try to crash down to the south and east. There's some cooler air behind it and some very warm and moist air out in front of it. And that is the prime ingredients for severe weather, as you guys already know. So let's put this into motion. We'll watch that thing quickly turn into a big squall line of thunderstorms today around 2 p.m. We're going to see a little bit of a warm front feature on the front side of this too that's going to dip down into portions of Minnesota. And it's these storms right here that could become supercellular. It's very unlikely. It looks like a lot of these storms are going to be multicellular and they're just going to clump together and cause a lot of rain. But there is some chance here that some of these storms could come out on their own, rotate enough to cause a brief tornado and maybe some large hail, okay? But the main story here, the main thing that we're looking at is this big old chunk of heavy rain and severe thunderstorms here right now at 2 p.m. from central Minnesota all the way down into portions of southeastern South Dakota. And that's going to very quickly organize, and look at this. This is when it starts looking mean, okay? Around 4 p.m. today, whenever all those storms kind of congeal into a tightly packed line like this, looks like a backwards C. We call that a bow echo. And this stuff right here can cause big time wind gusts, all right? This is the kind of storms that can provoke wind gusts in excess of 70, 80 miles an hour, and in some cases 90 miles an hour, okay? We've got a lot of forcing behind here that's going to push it forward, and we've got plenty of energy out in front of it that's going to allow for these storms to continue to convect and reform as they get pushed by that outflow boundary. And what that means is we could be talking about a prolific wind event today in southern Minnesota and northern Iowa, okay? Especially right here, okay? Around this time between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. today, I would definitely look out for the chance for, once again, some very severe weather, with the main threat being those straight line damaging winds as they move through this area. 6 p.m., here we are, 7 p.m., 8 p.m. This is still a very dangerous storm as this pushes down into central portions of Iowa. Also up here on the northern side where that mesoscale convective vortex is really just ramping up. I would not be surprised to see a couple spin up tornadoes up here on this side in extreme southeastern Minnesota, maybe portions of Wisconsin on the western side too. If you're west of Eau Claire there, I would definitely watch out for this storm. Make sure you got a good radar app and then keep up with it as it comes towards you, and make sure you have some way of getting tornado warnings, and in this case severe thunderstorm warnings, because those severe thunderstorm warnings could mean seen more than what they normally do. I know everybody's used to getting those, but in a situation like this, where the winds could be really ramping up, we are talking about some unique severe thunderstorms as this passes through. Now, thankfully, as we get into the overnight hours, these storms run on sunlight, so they are going to start dying off before they get to the bigger cities. Now, Cedar Rapids, Dubuque, and Des Moines, you guys can all see some severe weather today, but I think the vast majority of the wind damage is going to happen to your north and west. But as you can see, these storms do roll through your area around 10 or 11, and then they get into the Madison, Wisconsin region there around 12, and then by the time they get into extreme northwestern portions of Illinois, they really start to fizzle out, and we're left with some heavy rain on the backside, maybe round 2 there for portions of northern Iowa with some gusty winds once again. And then once we get into the early morning hours tomorrow, this is Friday, August 27th at 9 a.m., we've got some more rain showers, and it's just that time of year, man. We've got all this warm air and then all this cold air back here, okay? We're about to enter fall, right? So we're entering this time period where there's a battle zone here between those two air masses, okay? We've got warm air advection trying to happen. We've got some cold air advection trying to happen. And right there where those two things meet, we see constant storms. And that's why tomorrow we are looking at more severe weather possible here in Iowa. Slight risk of severe weather is possible down there. It might be big hail producers. And once again, they could produce some isolated tornadoes, but I don't think the wind threat's going to be nearly as bad. And then we set ourselves up for some more severe weather once again on Saturday. So you guys are definitely dealing with a lot of severe weather up here. You have been for the past month or so. And I think that today's chance of severe weather is definitely going to be the most significant. So make sure you have a plan in place to, if you do get that destructive severe thunderstorm warning coming through, 80 miles an hour winds is just as bad as a weak tornado. So do not disregard a straight line damaging wind event. If you usually take tornadoes really seriously, you also need to take this very seriously, okay? Now, looky here. What do we got down here? Let's check out that. We're going to switch to the Gulf of Mexico view and brace yourselves. Ooh, Lord goodness. That right there would be, once again, Hurricane Ida as it is working its way into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the NAM 3-kilometer model doesn't have the ability to show us what this storm's going to look like as it's down there near Cuba, but the model starts working right here, right when we can really see its scary face starting to show itself, and it looks to me like it's, following the other models and taking it towards Louisiana. So once again, guys, this is going to be a pretty significant storm, but it's hard to trust these models right now because, once again, look above my head. You see that blob up there, that red and orange and green blob? I mean, that's all it is. It's a blob. There is no storm yet. There is no center of circulation. There is no low-level center. There is no storm. So the fact that all the models are so agreed on where this storm's going to go and the intensity and everything is kind of freaking me out. All right, because usually what happens is all the models are all over the place. And then once the storm forms, then they start to actually, get a good idea of what's going to happen. So, I'm kind of on the fence here. I definitely want to get people prepared on the coast. But at the same time, I've got a gut feeling that some of these models are going to drastically change once this storm actually forms and we get some more data on that low-level center. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that, maybe it's not going to hit here in Louisiana and it goes a little bit further west or east? Or does that mean that it's not going to be a bad storm at all? Or does that mean that it's going to be an even more significant storm than what we think right now? All of those options are possible, but all we can do right now is look at the data we have. So that's what we're going to do. All right, this is the National Hurricane Center's website here. We're going to get an update from them before we start looking at model data. As you can see, we've got a couple areas of interest out here. It's peak hurricane season, that's for sure. But the one that we're really going to focus on is this down here. And once again, we're calling this Invest 99L. Currently has a 90% chance of forming into a full-blown tropical storm or hurricane within the next 2 days, okay? So that right there is a cause for concern. And there's already some pretty concerning wording coming out from the National Hurricane Center for this blob that's not even a storm yet. If you want to pause the video and read this, go ahead. Also, familiarize yourself with this website. The National Hurricane Center is the best place to get updates on hurricane stuff. All right, back to model data now. We are looking at the GFS, okay? We're going to look at a lot of models today. Well, actually, we're going to look at 3 or 4, but we're going to look at the GFS here. We're going to look at the Euro, and then we're going to look at the HWRF. We're going to start with the GFS, and we're looking at the Caribbean here in the Gulf of Mexico. So you can see our blob. This is at 5 a.m. tomorrow. It's still going to be a blob down here, but it does look like it might have a little bit of a a low pressure system actually forming in it, okay? So this is showing a 998 millibar low. That's just south of Cuba there, and it does look like it's going to be going in this general direction. Let's go ahead and just pull it forward and see what we're looking at here. By Saturday at 8 a.m., it's already going to be at the same parallel level as Miami and still continuing to move to the northwest, okay? At this point, it's still just a 991 millibar low pressure system, and that's another thing that I'm kind of iffy about, okay? So, you know, these models, once again, they're going to change significantly once we get a low-level center formed here. And I think one of the things that is a possibility is that this storm actually becomes more intense than what the models are showing right now. These waters out here are warm, all right? And there's very little shear. There's very little limiting factors out here that are going to keep the storm from intensifying. So I believe that at this point, we could be looking at a 980-something millibar low pressure system as it moves up to the north and west. Now, the warmest waters are going to be right here next to Louisiana. So once it gets there, it's definitely going to rapidly intensify, and the models do show that. Let me show you. Let's go all the way out there. Here we are at 975, all the way down to a 972, 973 at landfall there, somewhere near New Orleans, according to the GFS, around 2 p.m. on Sunday, August 29th. So one model, don't go ahead and think that that's exactly when it's going to make landfall, but one model does show that this is going to make landfall on Sunday at 2 p.m. This is a little bit faster. This is a little bit quicker than what some of the models were showing yesterday. And remember, the faster this storm flies through the Gulf of Mexico, the weaker it's going to be, okay? It has to have time to sit over these warm waters to really start to gain strength, okay? If it slows down anywhere out here, it is going to become a major hurricane. So, you know, our saving grace might be the fact that this really hightails it up there to the northwest really fast and only hits as a category 2 or something like that. But a category 3 or above is definitely going to be what we're dealing with if this thing slows down any at all. All right, let's zoom in here on Louisiana, and we're going to watch these wind gusts as they move in, okay? So around 1 a.m. on Sunday, you're already going to start seeing some of those tropical storm force winds there in southeastern Louisiana. But look at this. You see that red and stuff down there? That's your hurricane force winds coming in. And keep up with this, all right? This max down here, that's showing you the highest winds that are possible with this storm as we go forward. And it looks to me like the maximum wind we're going to get out of this is around 111 miles an hour right there during landfall, and that is a low-end category 3 storm. And remember, the GFS is showing probably one of the weaker scenarios that we can see, at least right now, okay? Some of them might show weaker stuff once we get that LLC formed, but as of right now, the GFS is saying, okay, max winds 111, and that's with a fast-moving storm and only a 991 millibar storm way back there in the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, I think that we can see something bigger than that. I don't want to see something bigger than that, but let's go ahead and assume that the GFS is right. This is still going to be a devastating storm for southeastern Louisiana, especially the way it's coming in, man. You see these winds that are coming in this way right here. This is just the worst case scenario for flooding and storm surge for this portion of southeastern Louisiana. We know all about it. Hurricane Katrina was only a category 3 storm when it made landfall, and it caused, you know, significant damage. Am I saying that this is going to be Hurricane Katrina 2.0? Absolutely not. But we do know what can happen when we get these winds wrapping around the center of circulation there in this portion of Louisiana. So we got to think of that as a possibility for some coastal flooding down there, and possibly some major coastal flooding if this is the path that it takes. Now let's keep pushing it forward. And as you can see all the way here as we get into 7 p.m. on Sunday, once the winds are a little bit more inland, we're still talking about hurricane force winds all the way up into the New Orleans area. And then it quickly dies out like most hurricanes do and turns into a tropical depression and tropical storm as it goes through Mississippi. Now, if you live in Mississippi and stuff and you're thinking, well, Ryan, give us a full forecast and how's this going to affect Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas? Guys, I can't do that right now. It's not going to affect you guys nearly as bad as how it's going to affect New Orleans. Once we get closer to landfall and once we get closer to understanding all of the impacts on the Gulf Coast, then we'll start talking about the inland effects. As of right now, it does look like there's a possibility for some flooding and maybe some tornadoes, and we'll talk more about that in the future, okay? All right, now let's take a look at the Euro. We're going to look at the exact same parameters here, and we're going to see what the differences are, okay? Here we are, once again, pretty well, actually, let's go one more north there. Here we are parallel with Miami here, and this is in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico as a 987 millibar low pressure system. I buy that a little bit more, okay? So that's showing a little bit more of an organized storm there, and then what happens with this? It looks like it's it's also a little bit further west here. As this gets closer to landfall, we're looking at a 970, 960, possibly all the way down to a low 960 millibar low pressure system as this makes landfall here a little bit further west than what the GFS shows. But this is definitely a stronger storm here on the Euro, okay? So the Euro is usually pretty conservative with these kind of storms, and usually it doesn't show them until the last minute. But now we're looking at the Euro model here, and it's showing a stronger storm than what the GFS shows. So let's zoom in again. So right off the bat, if we're looking at Louisiana here, you can see that the wind field is already bigger. And here we are, it's still way offshore, and we're talking about 118 mile an hour winds. Here we are, 120 miles an hour, all the way up to 124.9 right before landfall. And guys, once again, that's a high-end Category 3 hurricane. That would be a major hurricane. And this is going to, according to this model, affect an area that does not need to see any more hurricanes. Louisiana has just been a hurricane magnet here over the past little bit, and the Euro does paint a sobering picture for the people who live down there. If this is the path that it takes, it's likely to become a little bit more strong because it's going to take a little bit longer for it to get there, and that makes perfect sense as this does show, even as this gets closer to landfall, 113 mile an hour winds, 107 mile an hour winds around the center of circulation here, all the way once this thing is a couple miles inland, and it doesn't show much signs of weakening. Here we are almost in central Louisiana with 97 mile an hour winds, 89 miles an hour, and then maybe even still hurricane force winds all the way as this gets up into Mississippi and northeastern Louisiana here. So we'll take that with a grain of salt. It's very likely that the GFS option happens here. I doubt we're going to see a hurricane all the way up into central Mississippi, but anything can happen. So we're going to continue to watch it, and we'll be open to every scenario until the thing happens. All right, one last model here I want to show you guys is the HWRF. I like looking at this one because we do have the 4 different panels here to look at, okay? We've got the radar, we've got the surface temperature, the sea surface temperature, we've got the wind speed intensity at 925 millibars in knots, and then we have the PWAT, the precipitable water up here. So let's go ahead and spin this thing up until it starts spinning itself. And this model actually shows it taking a little bit further of a southwesterly approach as it grazes past the Yucatan Peninsula here. Pretty much all the other models show this going across Cuba. Now, the worst case scenario would be that it goes in between them, all right? It's got exactly in between them because when this thing goes across Cuba or when this thing goes across the peninsula there in Mexico, it's going to weaken a little bit, so it'll lose some of its momentum. Now, if it doesn't actually hit either of them, this could be end up being a bad storm. Pushing it all the way out until we are in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico here. You can see that circulation there on the radar very easily. You can see all of that precipitable water rotating around the center of circulation. Some of those 925 millibar winds are approaching 100 to 115 knots here on the northeastern side of the eye wall. And the main thing that I want to focus on here is this, okay? This is at the point where it gets into some of the higher sea surface temperatures, all right? All the browns that you see there are sea surface temperatures above 28 degrees Celsius. Now, jet fuel for storms to form and really intensify is going to be about around 29 to 30 degrees Celsius and higher. So these lighter colors over here, once it gets closer to that, it is going to continue to intensify. Now, here's another thing that's working for us. As the storm gets closer to the warmer waters, it's such a big storm and it has such a large cloud field and precipitation field that it is going to cool the waters off before the center of circulation gets to it. Now, it's not going to cool it off so much that it's actually going to stop it from intensifying, but it definitely will stop it from intensifying as much as it could if it didn't do that. So as you can see, let me push this back a little bit. As you can see, as this thing goes to the north and west, it's carving out a path of cooler temperatures in front of it and behind it. So the thing that matters the most, though, is where the inflow of the storm's coming in. It is actually showing, once again, still this storm getting into very, very warm waters around 30 degrees Celsius. And this model is way further west than a lot of the other ones, and it's showing a landfall right there on the border, literally right on the border of Texas and Louisiana. So we've seen one over here, we've seen one over here, and now we're seeing this. So pretty much the entire state of Louisiana needs to be on lookout, and possibly even into portions of southeastern Texas. So, and once again, this shows a very significant hurricane here, possibly Category 3, possibly Category 4, and this is the best I can tell you right now. We're not even close to nailing this thing down exactly where it's going to go. We still have a ways to go before we know that. But if you subscribe to this channel, you'll be the first to know, I promise. All right, that's all the weather talk I have for you today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I will be here every single day until we get done with this hurricane here, and I'll probably be here every single day after that because we're going to have more hurricanes, guys. It's peak hurricane season. It's what happens this time of year. The plan is that I'm going to do daily updates all the way until we're around 18 hours before landfall. I'll make a final update here on YouTube, and then I'll probably start around 12 hours before landfall, or maybe 10 or 8 hours before landfall, and start doing a live stream. And we will live stream all of the latest updates all the way until it does make landfall, and then a few hours afterwards. That's right, I'm talking about a 12 to 18 hour long live stream here, and I'm only going to do that if this storm actually does end up becoming a major hurricane. So if this landfalls as a Category 1 or a Category 2, I might do a shorter live stream as it makes landfall, but I'm not going to do the 12 to 18 hour long thing unless this is a major hurricane that's going to affect a lot of people and possibly cause significant damage to life and property. So if you're interested in any of that, make sure you slap that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn those notifications on so you don't miss any of the videos or the live stream whenever it comes up. Guys, I appreciate you so much for being here, and I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.